This story is called Dad, and my fiance confessed they've been together for 3 months. Hey everyone, before we dive into today's video, I need a favor from you all. We've seen the channel's momentum slowing down, and subscribing is one of the easiest and best ways you can help. It's fast, free, and helps us continue creating great content for you. Your support means everything, and we appreciate it. Let's keep growing this channel together. Thank you so much. Now let's get into the video. All right, before I get into the complete disaster my life turned into, let me give you some background. I'm 31 years old, male, and had been with Sarah, 29, female, for nearly 5 years when everything fell apart. We met at a corporate event. I was working for her company, and she was in marketing. It wasn't some magical romantic first encounter, just standard office chit-chat that somehow led to coffee, dinner, and well, you know how it goes. Things were good between us. We had our disagreements, but nothing serious. We got engaged a few months before this all unfolded. Nothing extravagant, just took her to a little Italian place where we had our first date. I got down on one knee, all the classic stuff. She cried, I almost dropped the ring, and the elderly couple next to us bought us champagne. It was a nice moment. My mom passed away from cancer 4 years ago, and it hit our family really hard. She was the one who held everything together, always organizing family events and making sure we stayed in touch. Dad took it especially hard. They had been married for 35 years, high school sweethearts. And he kind of withdrew for a while, barely leaving the house except for work. Sarah was amazing during that time, helping with the funeral plans and checking in on Dad when I was busy with work. She'd bring him groceries and keep him company. Yeah, I know what you're thinking now. But back then, I just thought I had the most thoughtful fiancé. Anyway, this day started like any other. It was a Wednesday in July, sweltering hot outside. I remember being at work, dealing with a customer who couldn't figure out how to reset their password for the millionth time, when Sarah texted me saying Dad had invited us over for dinner. That wasn't unusual. We'd go over there once or twice a month. Dad's cooking was actually pretty good. Mom made sure he knew how to cook before she passed, and I always felt a bit sorry for him being alone in that big house. Looking back, there were probably signs I missed. Dad had been oddly cheerful lately, going out more, even joining a gym or something. I remember telling Sarah how nice it was to see him finally moving on with his life. She just smiled and said it was great to see him happy again. I was so naive. I got home from work around 5:30, changed out of my work clothes, and Sarah was already there, getting ready. She was acting kind of strange, changing outfits and fixing her makeup more than usual. I even made a joke about it being just dinner with Dad, not a date with the president. She laughed, but it was that forced laugh she did when she was nervous about something. The drive to Dad's place was about 20 minutes. Sarah was quiet the entire time, checking her phone. I figured she was dealing with work stuff. She'd been stressed about a big marketing campaign. The radio was playing that annoying Olivia Rodrigo song that was everywhere the previous summer. And Sarah usually sang along, but this time she just stared out the window. We arrived at Dad's place around 7 o'clock, and it looked the same as always. Mom's flower beds were still there, but they weren't as nice as when she cared for them. Dad tried, but he didn't have her green thumb. The porch light was on, and I could smell garlic bread as soon as we got out of the car. Dad was making his lasagna, which was usually a good sign. It was his comfort food whenever he had something important to discuss. I remember thinking maybe he was going to tell us he'd started dating someone, which would explain why he seemed so happy lately. I even mentioned to Sarah on the way up to the door that I hoped that was the case, because Dad deserved to find someone new. She squeezed my hand tightly, but didn't say anything. Dad answered the door wearing his cooking apron, the one Mom had bought him as a joke that says, "Kiss the cook," with a million wine stains on it. He hugged Sarah first, which was unusual. He'd never done that before. Usually just a wave or a quick side hug if we were celebrating something. But this time, it was a full-on hug. I didn't think much of it at the time, just assumed he was in a good mood. The house smelled amazing. Garlic bread, tomato sauce, that homey smell that makes you feel all warm inside. We went straight to the kitchen, and Dad had set the table nicely, with the good plates Mom used for special occasions. There was even wine already poured. If someone had told me what was about to happen, I would have laughed in their face. Everything seemed so normal, just another family dinner. But I guess that's how it always goes. You never see the knife until it's already in your back. Writing this now makes me want to throw up, remembering how clueless I was. So there we were, sitting at my dad's dinner table, eating his lasagna, like it was just another Wednesday night. Looking back, the tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife, but I was too blind to notice. Funny how your brain doesn't want to acknowledge the obvious sometimes. Both of them were acting like everything was fine, but in that fake way that makes your gut twist, you know? That feeling when something is off, but you can't quite put your finger on it. Like when you walk into your apartment and something's been moved, but you don't know what. Dad kept refilling everyone's wine glasses, which was strange because he's usually strict about drinking, especially since Mom passed. He had a tough time with it right after we lost her, but now here he was, making sure no one's glass was ever empty. That should have been a red flag. Sarah wasn't eating much, barely touching her food, which was odd because Dad's lasagna was her favorite. She kept glancing at him when she thought I wasn't looking, doing this strange thing with her napkin where she was tearing it into little pieces under the table. I noticed but thought maybe she was stressed about work or something. God, I was so blind. The conversation was weird, too. Usually, we'd talk about normal things. Work, TV shows, maybe some family gossip. But this time, it was all surface-level nonsense. Dad kept starting sentences, but not finishing them. And Sarah was overly focused on the new curtains Dad had put up in the living room. Who cares that much about curtains? After we finished eating, Dad got up to clear the plates. Sarah jumped up to help him, which wasn't unusual. She always helped with dishes when we came over. But the way they moved around each other in the kitchen, it was like they had practiced some kind of dance. They knew exactly where the other person was going to be and never bumped into each other. At the time, I just thought it was nice that they got along so well. I'm such an idiot. Then Dad brought out dessert, Mom's apple pie recipe. This should have been another red flag because Dad never made Mom's apple pie. It was like this sacred thing. He hadn't made it since she passed. But there it was, sitting on the table, looking perfect with vanilla ice cream on the side. I took a bite and said it tasted just like Mom's. Dad got this look on his face, like he'd been punched in the gut. Sarah wouldn't touch hers. She just pushed it around on her plate with her fork, and the ice cream melted into a sad puddle around the pie. That's when Dad cleared his throat and said the words that still make my stomach turn. "We need to talk to you about something." Suddenly, Sarah got really focused on her napkin again, not looking at me at all. You know how in movies, when something bad is about to happen, everything fades away and it feels like everything is in slow motion? That's exactly how it felt. I could hear my own heartbeat. The ticking of Mom's old clock on the wall seemed deafening. Dad's face looked like when he had to tell me Mom's cancer was terminal. This expression like he was about to destroy my world. Sarah was crying silently, tears streaming down her face while she stared at the table. I remember thinking maybe Dad was sick, or maybe Sarah was pregnant, or some other possibility. Anything except what was really happening. Because who would ever imagine their dad and fiancé were about to tell them they'd been sleeping together? The pie was still sitting there, getting soggy from the melting ice cream. Mom's recipe that she only made for special family moments. I guess this counted as one of those moments, just not the way she would have ever imagined. The worst part is that I can't even eat apple pie anymore. Just looking at it makes me sick. They didn't just ruin my family and my relationship, they ruined dessert too. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The bomb hadn't dropped yet. We were still sitting there, the three of us, with that damn pie melting on the table. And I was still clueless, unaware that my life was about to explode. Dad was about to start talking, and I was sitting there like an idiot, worrying about what might be wrong with them. Sometimes I wish I could go back to that moment right before they told me. Freeze time when everything still made sense, when my dad was still my dad, and my fiancé was still the woman I thought I'd spend my life with. But you can't freeze time, can you? You just have to sit there and let the shit hit the fan. This part is hard to write. I've been sitting here for 20 minutes trying to figure out how to even start. I guess I'll just jump in. So, we're sitting there in Dad's living room, They insisted we move somewhere more comfortable after the pie incident. More comfortable? My ass. I'm pretty sure they just didn't want me holding any sharp objects when they dropped their bombshell. Dad was sitting in his old recliner. Mom's chair, actually. She used to sit there every evening reading her mystery novels. Sarah and I were on the couch, but she was sitting as far away from me as possible while still technically being on the same piece of furniture. I should have noticed that too. Dad kept opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. Sarah was full on crying now, not even trying to hide it. And here I was, just sitting there. I was seriously panicking, and in my mind, I kept thinking someone must be dying or something. I honestly wish that had been the case. Finally, Dad began speaking. Son, there's something Sarah and I need to tell you. He actually reached over and took her hand when he said it, just casually grabbing it like it was no big deal. My brain almost shut down for a moment, but I still wasn't getting it. Then Sarah starts with this whole speech about how they never meant for it to happen. You know, the kind of crap people say when they've done something awful but want to feel better about it. I'm sitting there thinking, what could possibly be so bad that they're both acting like someone just died? Then Dad blurts it out. We've been seeing each other romantically for about 3 months now. Have you ever been punched in the gut? Like really hard? This was worse. Way worse. It felt like someone reached inside me and started tearing my insides out. I couldn't catch my breath, and the room started spinning. You know what the first thing I said was? I actually asked, what do you mean by seeing each other? Like a complete idiot, as if there was some innocent explanation for why my dad was holding my fiancée's hand while she cried on his couch. They exchanged this look, this damn look that said everything. That was when I knew. They'd been sleeping together behind my back for 3 months. Then, because I apparently hate myself, I asked, how many times? Don't ask me why I needed to know that. Maybe I was hoping they'd say once, that it was a mistake, that they were drunk or something. But they didn't answer at first, which told me everything I needed to know. Sarah tried to explain how it all happened. Something about how she'd been going over to check on Dad more after I mentioned I was worried about him. They started talking more, getting closer, and one thing led to another. I wanted to vomit. The worst part was that Dad was sitting there, nodding along like she was telling some cute story about how they met. Like this was just another damn love story, not them destroying my entire life. I remember looking around the room while they were talking. All the family photos on the walls, pictures of me and Mom, their wedding photo, even a picture from the day I proposed to Sarah. Dad had taken it right after she said yes. All those pictures were staring down at us while they sat there, tearing apart everything those photos represented. I remember standing up, my legs shaking so bad I almost fell over. Sarah reached out to steady me, and I just lost it. I jumped back like she was on fire or something. The look on her face like she was the one who had the right to be hurt. That's when the anger hit. You know that saying, seeing red? I always thought it was just a figure of speech. It's not. Everything had this red tinge to it. I could feel my pulse in my eyes. My hands were clenched so tight my nails were cutting into my palms. They were both talking at once, trying to explain, trying to justify, I don't even know what. I couldn't really hear them over the sound of blood rushing in my ears. All I could think about was how many times they'd been together while I was at work, how many times she'd gone to check on him, and ended up in his bed, in my mom's bed. That's when I threw up, right there in my dad's living room, just turned and puked all over his fancy carpet. Probably ruined it, but screw him, he ruined my life, so I ruined his carpet. Seems fair, right? The next few minutes are kind of a blur. I remember Sarah trying to help clean up, and me yelling at her not to touch me. I remember Dad going to get paper towels like this was just some normal accident at a family dinner. Like we could just clean it up and everything would be fine. But nothing was fine. Nothing would ever be fine again. My damn dad, had been sleeping with the woman I was supposed to marry. The woman who helped me pick out my mom's headstone. The woman who was supposed to be the mother of my children one day. And there they were, standing in front of me, holding hands like teenagers caught making out at prom, Not like a father and future daughter-in-law who'd been having an affair for 3 months while I worked 60-hour weeks to save up for our wedding. That's when I knew. Really knew. Everything was over. Not just my engagement, not just my relationship with my dad. Everything. My whole life, as I knew it, was done. Nothing would ever be the same again. And the messed up part? They looked relieved. Like finally telling me was this huge weight off their shoulders. Like they could finally stop sneaking around and just be together. They dropped this nuclear bomb on my life, and they looked relieved about it. After I finished puking on Dad's carpet, still proud of that, by the way, everything happened really fast. It's strange how your brain works in moments like that. Some parts are totally fuzzy, but other tiny details are crystal clear. I remember looking at them both and feeling this weird sense of calm. Like, you know that moment in movies right before someone completely loses it? That kind of calm. Dad was still holding those damn paper towels, and Sarah was doing that stupid thing she does when she's nervous, tucking her hair behind her ears over and over. The first thing I did was look at my dad and say, "You want her? Keep her. We're done." Just like that. Didn't even raise my voice. Mom would have been proud of my self-control, I guess, though she probably wouldn't have been too thrilled about the whole husband sleeping with our son's fiancé situation. Then I turned to Sarah. She was wearing this blue dress I'd bought her for her birthday last year. It cost me $200, which was a lot for me back then. All I could think about was whether she'd worn it for my dad, whether he'd taken it off her. My brain was going places I didn't want it to. "Give me your keys," I said, just like that. She started crying harder, didn't think that was possible, and fumbling with her keychain. You know the kind girls have with like 50 different things hanging off of it? Yeah, that kind. She had this little photo keychain I'd gotten her with a picture of us from our first vacation together. Looking at it made me want to puke again. She couldn't get the key off. Her hands were shaking too much. Watching her struggle made me even angrier, so I just grabbed the whole keychain from her. Our fingers touched for a second, and I jerked back like I'd been burned. I started working on getting my apartment key off myself. Dad tried to step in, saying something about how we should all calm down and talk this through. Can you believe that? Like, we're discussing what movie to watch or something, not the fact that he'd been sleeping with my fiancé behind my back. I finally got the key off, handed her the keychain, and told her I'd pack her stuff and she could come get it when I was done. She started saying something about how she could explain everything, how it wasn't what I thought. I just laughed. What did she think this was? What possible explanation could make this okay? The whole time this is happening, I'm standing in this room surrounded by family photos. There's one right above the TV of me and Sarah at Christmas last year. We're wearing matching ugly sweaters, and she's kissing my cheek. I remember Dad took that picture. I wonder if they were already sleeping together then. I wonder if they laughed about it later. Sarah tried to touch my arm, and I flinched away so hard I knocked over one of Mom's old vases. It didn't break, just landed on the carpet I just puked on. Dad actually bent down to pick it up, like that was the most important thing happening right then. That's when something really messed up hit me. They'd been doing this in his house, in the house where I grew up, in the house where my mom died. Did they sleep together in my parents' bed? Did they do it on the couch where we used to have family movie nights? These thoughts just kept coming, and I couldn't make them stop. I started heading for the door. Sarah tried to follow me, still crying, saying she was sorry over and over. Sorry for what exactly? Sorry she slept with my dad? Or sorry she got caught? Dad was right behind her, saying we needed to talk this through, that we were family. Family? That word made me stop dead in my tracks. I turned around and looked at them both. Family? I said. You want to talk about family? You've been sleeping with my fiancé for 3 months, and you want to talk about family? That's when Dad started crying too. Fantastic! Now, they were both standing there crying like they were the victims in all of this. Like I was the bad guy for not understanding their so-called love, or whatever they were calling it. I remember looking at Sarah one last time. Before I left, she was wearing the engagement ring I'd spent months saving up for. It wasn't anything fancy, couldn't afford anything too expensive back then, but I picked it out especially, had it sized just right for her. She was nervously twisting it around on her finger, something she always did when she was anxious. You can keep the ring, I told her. Sell it, throw it away, give it to your next father-in-law. I don't care. Yeah, it was harsh, but you know what's worse? Sleeping with your fiance's dad. Walking to my car felt surreal, like the world was just carrying on as normal. The neighbor's kid was riding his bike. Someone was mowing their lawn. Everything looked ordinary, except nothing would ever be normal again. I got in my car, started it up, and they were both standing in the doorway, watching me. Dad had his arm around Sarah's shoulders. That image is burned into my brain forever. My dad, comforting my fiancé after I found out they'd been having an affair. It was like something straight out of a messed up soap opera. As I backed out of the driveway, I could see them through the window. They were hugging, actually hugging right there in front of me. That's when I really lost it. I punched the steering wheel so hard I think I cracked it. Still hurts when it's cold out. The drive home was mostly a blur. I remember stopping at a gas station to throw up again. The cashier asked if I was okay. I just laughed, okay? No, I'm not okay. My dad was sleeping with my fiancé. How could anything be okay? I got home to my apartment. Everything looked exactly the same. Her shoes by the door, her coffee mug in the sink, her stupid decorative pillows on the couch. All these little pieces of her life mixed in with mine. Now I had to untangle all of that. The first night back at the apartment was wild. You know how in movies when a relationship ends, they usually show the person drinking away their pain or smashing things? Well, I didn't do either of those things. Instead, I spent 4 hours organizing her stuff into boxes, like some kind of trauma-induced cleaning spree. My phone was blowing up the whole time. I had to put it on silent because the constant buzzing was driving me insane. Sarah and Dad were tag-teaming it. One would call, then the other would text, then back to the first one calling again. It was like they were working in shifts or something. I saved some of the texts because I couldn't believe how delusional they were. Here's one from Sarah. Please let me explain. It's not what you think. We never meant to hurt you. Like, what did she think would happen? That I'd be cool with my dad sleeping with my fiancé? That we'd all laugh about it at Thanksgiving? Dad's messages were even worse. Son, I know this is hard to understand, but sometimes life takes unexpected turns. Unexpected turns? Pretty sure don't sleep with your kid's fiancé is basic parenting 101. Around 2 a.m., I found her birth control pills in the bathroom. The fancy kind I'd been paying for because they were the only ones that didn't make her sick. I looked at the date she'd gotten them refilled, right around when this thing with Dad started. I wondered if she'd been planning it then. If she knew she'd need them for him. I threw them in the trash so hard the container cracked. The next morning, Sarah's mom called. Not Sarah. She didn't have the guts to come herself. Her mom was actually decent about it, which was weird. She said, I'm so sorry. I had no idea, and I'm ashamed of what she's done. It made me feel even worse somehow, knowing that even her own mother was disgusted with her. I let her mom in to get Sarah's stuff. She brought these big plastic totes, like she was helping someone move to college. We didn't talk much while she was packing. What do you even say in that situation? Hey, sorry your daughter turned out to be the kind of person who sleeps with her fiancé's dad? I found out later that Sarah had told her mom everything the night before. Apparently, she'd shown up at their house crying, probably expecting sympathy. Instead, her mom lost it. Called her every name in the book. Her dad couldn't even look at her. At least someone's parents had some morals. While her mom was packing, Sarah kept texting me, asking if I was okay, if I seemed angry, if I was drinking, like she had any right to worry about me after what she did. Her mom actually showed me the texts. She said, I think you should see what kind of person she really is. The texts were wild. Sarah was acting like the victim, saying things like, I just need him to understand. And Dad and I didn't mean for this to happen. Dad! She was calling him Dad. Like, what the actual hell? She'd been calling him Richard for 5 years, but now suddenly, he's Dad? I threw up again when I saw that. Right in the kitchen sink. Sarah's mom just handed me a paper towel and kept packing. While her mom was gathering stuff from the bedroom, I found Sarah's diary. I've never read it before. I'm not that kind of guy, but I sat there staring at it for 20 minutes, wondering if she'd written about them, if there were details in there I didn't want to know but needed to. In the end, I gave it to her mom without opening it. Some things you're better off not knowing, right? The photos were the worst part. They were everywhere. On the walls, on the fridge, in frames, on every damn surface. 5 years of memories, all tainted now. I found one from last Thanksgiving. Me, Sarah, and Dad, all together, smiling like one big, happy family. I wonder if they were already eyeing each other up then. If they were already planning this. I gave all the photos to her mom, too, told her to burn them. Sarah's mom found her wedding planning binder. You know, one of those big ones with all the magazine cutouts and color swatches. She started crying when she saw it. She said she'd been so happy when we got engaged that she'd already started thinking of me as a son. Guess Sarah found a different way to make me family, huh? The calls and texts didn't stop. Dad switched tactics, started sending long, rambling messages about how Mom would want us to work through this as a family. Using Mom to justify this mess, now that was a new low. I actually sent him a text saying, pretty sure Mom didn't want you sleeping with my fiancé, and then blocked his number. Sarah's messages got more desperate as the day went on. She started threatening to come over, saying she'd sleep in her car outside if she had to. That's when her mom stepped in and told her if she tried any of that, she'd call the cops herself. Never thought I'd be grateful for my ex-future mother-in-law, but here we are. By the time her mom left with all her stuff, it took 3 carloads. Amazing how much crap you can accumulate in 5 years. I was exhausted, not just physically, but soul tired. You know that feeling? Like your whole body is done with everything. My apartment felt weird, too big, too empty, too quiet. All her stuff was gone, but I could still smell her perfume everywhere. I still had her favorite coffee creamer in the fridge. Her hairs were still around the bathroom doorknob. All these little pieces of her life that she left behind, like breadcrumbs leading to nowhere. I called in sick to work for the rest of the week. I couldn't deal with pretending everything was normal. My boss was cool about it. Just said, take all the time you need. I wonder what Sarah told her work. Sorry, can't come in today. Too busy sleeping with my fiancé's dad. The worst part? I found out later that some of her stuff in those boxes wasn't even from our apartment. Some of it was from Dad's house. She'd been keeping clothes there, had her own damn toothbrush there. They'd been playing house while I was at work, trying to build us a future. I think that's when it really hit me. This wasn't just some one-time thing. They'd been building a whole secret life together right under my nose. In my dad's house, in my mom's house, spent that night sitting on the kitchen floor drinking water because I was afraid if I started drinking anything stronger, I wouldn't stop. Reading their messages over and over like some kind of masochist. Still couldn't make sense of any of it. Still can't. So yeah, just when I thought this whole situation couldn't get any worse, my dad decided to play the concerned parent card and called the damn cops on me. Apparently, sleeping with your son's fiancé is fine, but not answering your phone for a few days? That's when you need to get the authorities involved. It was maybe 4 or 5 days after everything went down. I'd been ignoring both of them completely. Their calls, their texts, everything. It was actually starting to feel a little bit better, you know? I'd cleaned the whole apartment like 3 times, thrown out anything that reminded me of either of them, and was starting to think maybe I could get through this without completely losing my mind. Then there was a knock at my door around 8 p.m. Not the usual knock, the cop knock, the one that sounds official. You know what I mean? I looked through the peephole and saw 2 officers standing there, one older guy probably around my dad's age. Damn it, why did my brain go there? And this younger female officer who looked kind of uncomfortable. I opened the door, and the older cop starts with, "Good evening, sir. We're here because your father called, concerned about your well-being." Like it was totally normal. Like they got calls every day about guys whose dads were worried about them after sleeping with their fiancés. The female cop was holding a clipboard and looking at me like she was trying to decide if I was about to go postal or something. I must have looked pretty rough, hadn't really been sleeping or eating much, probably hadn't shaved in days. Your father says you haven't been responding to his calls or messages, the older cop continues, like he's telling me my dad's. Feelings were hurt, or maybe he was worried that I might harm myself. I just started laughing, but not the usual kind. More like that laugh that's so close to tears. The officers exchanged a glance, probably thinking, great, we've got a live one. I managed to pull myself together enough to ask if my dad had said anything about why I wasn't speaking to him. Both officers shook their heads, so I told them everything. I explained that my dad had been sleeping with my fiancée for the last 3 months, and I found out about it just last week. That's why I wasn't answering his calls. You know that moment when someone's entire face changes because they realize they're in the middle of some major drama? That happened to both officers. The female officer muttered, "Oh shit," under her breath before trying to cover it up by coughing. The older cop's expression went from concerned professional to complete disbelief in an instant. He started scratching his neck and looking anywhere but at me, probably thinking about his own kids, wondering if they could ever do something this messed up. We had to go through this whole routine about whether I was suicidal. I wasn't, nor was I planning to hurt anyone. But they had a checklist to go through, standard procedure. Through it all, the female officer kept giving me a look that mixed pity and disgust, not aimed at me, but at the situation. The worst part was having to stand there and explain it all to two strangers. They were just doing their jobs, probably expecting to handle someone having a breakdown, not witnessing the mess that was my life. The older cop actually apologized, saying something like, "I'm sorry you're going through this, son," but immediately looked like he regretted it, considering the whole dad issue. They had to call it into the station to update them. I overheard the dispatcher asking for details, and the female officer just said the situation was complicated and that I was fine. She probably didn't want to include the detail about my father sleeping with my fiancée in an official report. Before they left, the older cop handed me a counseling service card, telling me I might want to talk to someone about all this. He quietly added, just so his partner wouldn't hear, that if his dad did something like that to him, he'd need someone to talk to as well. The female officer gave me a sad smile and told me to take care of myself. She clearly wanted to say more, but had to keep it professional. They both looked relieved to leave, which I couldn't blame them for. After they left, I just stood there for 10 minutes, unable to decide whether I was more angry or embarrassed. It wasn't bad enough that my dad and fiancé betrayed me. Now I had to explain it to the damn police. I had to stand there while two strangers processed how screwed up my life had become. I called my dad after that, the first time I'd answered any of his calls. I told him, if you ever call the cops on me again, I'll expose everything you did to everyone you know, every friend, every coworker, everyone at church. They'll all know exactly what kind of father you are. He tried to explain himself again, saying he was just worried about me and couldn't bear the thought of me doing something reckless because of their mistake. Their mistake? Like they accidentally ordered the wrong takeout or something. Not that they'd been secretly sleeping together for 3 months. I hung up on him mid-sentence and blocked his number again. Then I took the longest shower of my life, like I could somehow wash off the shame of telling two random cops how my dad had stolen my fiancée. The cop's business card is still sitting on my counter. I haven't called it yet. I probably should, but how do you even start that conversation with a therapist? "Hi, my dad's sleeping with my fiancée. How many sessions do you think that'll take to fix?" Later, I found out my dad had told the cops I wasn't eating or sleeping, that I'd been acting erratically. It depends on what you call erratic, I guess. He conveniently left out the part where he was the reason for all that. Nice little detail to omit. The whole thing just made me feel dirty, like their betrayal was now part of an official record somewhere. Like, there's a police report out there that basically says this guy's dad slept with his fiancée, and he's taking it pretty hard. Just one more humiliation to add to the pile. But hey, at least the cops seemed more disgusted with them than with me. That's something, right? Small victories, I suppose. I'll keep you guys updated if something happens. Final update. I've cut off my dad and fiancé after learning they've been sleeping together. Hey Reddit, a lot of you have been asking for updates about my situation with my dad and ex-fiancé, so I figured I'd post one last update. This will likely be my final post on this whole mess. First, I want to thank everyone for all the support and advice from my earlier posts. You really helped me get through some dark times, even if some of the suggestions were a bit wild. No, I didn't hire a skywriter to expose them at a family reunion, lol. So here's where things stand now. I'm doing okay, like actually okay, not just saying that. I've been seeing a therapist thanks to that cop who gave me the card, and it's helping. I still have days when I want to punch something, but those days are becoming less frequent. The crazy part is that my ex-fiancée Sarah actually outed herself to everyone. She went crying to her best friend, expecting sympathy, but it completely backfired. Her friend flipped out, and within 48 hours, everyone in our social circle knew what happened. Their reaction was pretty much what you'd expect. She lost most of her friends, and they straight up asked her if she'd been sleeping with any of their dads too. Brutal, but she deserved it. Her best friend reached out to me afterward. We talked for hours on the phone, and she's been really supportive. No, we're not dating or hooking up before anyone asks. She's just been a good friend. She's been cheated on before, but she says she can't even imagine what it would be like when it's your own dad involved. I met with my dad one last time to collect some of my mom's things, including her wedding ring. I brought a friend along to make sure I didn't do anything stupid. Dad tried to act normal, but when I handed him my ex's engagement ring and told him he could propose to her with it if he wanted to, it seemed to hit him how badly he'd screwed up. Too little, too late, though. As for Sarah, she's apparently a mess. She moved back in with her parents, who are disgusted with her. She's lost most of her friends, and from what I hear, she still thinks there's a chance I might forgive her. Yeah, not happening. Her parents actually apologized to me, which was weird, but kind of nice. The kicker, my dad and Sarah are still together. Someone saw them together in town recently. I guess they figure they might as well stay together since they've already ruined every relationship they had. They've lost most of their friends, too. People don't really support the whole dad sleeping with son's fiancé thing. Who would have thought? I've redecorated my apartment, bought a new bed because, well, you know, and got rid of anything that reminded me of them. Even got rid of my old couch because I kept thinking about what happened on it. The place feels different now, but in a good way. It feels like a fresh start. I told my other friends they don't have to pick sides or avoid Sarah if they don't want to. I'm not trying to control anyone or make them choose. That kind of petty stuff just isn't worth it. Most of them chose sides anyway, but at least I can say I took the high road there. Some days are still rough. Sometimes I smell her perfume in a random place, and it hits me all over again. Or I'll see something that reminds me of my dad, and I get angry again. But honestly, I'm glad I found out before we got married, before we had kids, before things got even messier. So yeah, that's where things stand now. My dad and Sarah are together and miserable. Karma's a bitch. I'm single and working on myself. Life goes on. Thanks again for all the support, Reddit. You guys helped me realize I wasn't crazy for cutting them both off completely. Holy crap, this blew up. Thanks for all the awards, but maybe donate to betrayal trauma resources instead. Since people keep asking, no, they haven't tried contacting me again. They finally got the message after I threatened to expose them to everyone they know. To the people suggesting I should try to forgive them for my own peace, respectfully, fuck that. Some things don't deserve forgiveness.